Welcome back to Pride. In our last video on the won't start section, we got our Toro snowblower running. On today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to add a shutoff switch on your fuel line. The problem that this snowblower had was there was too much fuel sitting in the carburetor when not being used. I picked this up for free. It wouldn't start. We had to take apart the carburetor and clean it. It wasn't a big job, but it's not something you want to have to constantly do anytime you leave any gas sitting in there. And you don't want to run the whole tank after every use. It would be nice to have a shutoff switch. That way you could just burn up what's left in the carburetor after every use. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to put our snowblower up so that we could get access to that bottom panel. Our fuel line is right about here, running across to our carburetor. So we want to get a real good idea of where to put our access in this bottom panel. So we're going to remove these two bolts, 8mm, and get this bottom panel off. That way we could get a real good view of exactly where we should make our hole so that we could get access to that fuel line just by reaching in and turning that shutoff switch. So we'll go ahead and remove that bottom panel. Just an 8mm socket, or you can use a flathead screwdriver as well. This is, I would call this a defect because this snowblower, it's a good snowblower. It's nice. I haven't used it for snow yet, just got it running. But it's definitely a feature that it should have had. So we're gonna try to add it in, do it the best we can. The main thing, the only hard part, is giving yourself access to be able to comfortably turn it on and off. Once you remove the two screws, that bottom panel will come right off. Here's our fuel line. There's our fuel filter. Right here would be a great spot for that switch to be. So if we go by our choke, which is right here, our choke sticks out from this cutout right here. Let's put it back on again. Let's take a look. This box right here might be the spot that would give us perfect access to that fuel line. No, it's going to be a little bit lower. It's going to be right down here. This way we can gain access to that fuel line. We also have this end of the fuel line here. That might be too tight of a spot to be able to get any type of access. I think here is going to be our best bet to add our shutoff switch. We just need to be real careful. You always want to measure twice, cut once, of where we put our cutout to be able to get good access, because we don't want to cut too much of this out. I was planning on just doing a circle cut. It's about a 1.5 inch hole, just enough to be able to get your two fingers in there and turn the switch, turning off the gas. So if we had our hole right here, we would be just about dead on to be able to access our switch. So we'll do our hole first. This way we can then put a little notch on that line and put our shutoff switch in the correct spot. So first we're just going to drill a small pilot hole. Widen it up a little bit. Just a guide hole. we'll get our nice big cutout. There you have it. We'll hit this with some sandpaper just to smoothen it all out. And we've got a very nice sized cutout hole to be able to access that shut-off switch for the fuel line. It's also important to sand this down for functionality, you know. You don't want to be scratching your hand every time you go to shut off your fuel. So you want this hole to be nice and smooth, as if this is how the manufacturer made it, you know. Any type of modifications like this, you want to do it as nice as you can, you know. You don't want it ghetto rigged. Take the time, just sand it down. Only takes a couple minutes to smooth out that hole. This way you have more comfort when you're using it. No loose pieces of plastic, no sharp edges. Perfect. Once you're happy with the smoothness, we're going to put that panel back on. Let's see how good we did with getting right on line with our fuel line. So our fuel line is right here. Now I can use a razor blade just to put a little notch on it to show myself exactly where I'm going to put that shut-off switch. Let me get a good view for you guys. So now you can see directly below the 50 psi fuel line. So we did a good job measuring. We're right on target with our fuel line. So now I'm just going to take a razor blade and put a little notch right on that fuel line, right in between the 50 and the psi. This way I've got it nice and centered, making it easy access to be able to turn that fuel off whenever we're done using this snowblower. Alright, we've got our mark done. We're just going to use a small razor. This one isn't even brand new. If it doesn't cut well, I'll definitely switch it for a brand new one, get a fresh blade. But this one should do just fine. If you're working in the cold, you might want to heat it up a little bit. The hose, you can use a heat gun just to warm it up a little bit, making it a little bit easier to get a smooth cut. And we should have no more fuel left in this line, but we'll keep our gas can handy just in case there's a little bit left in there from when I ran it. Be careful of your wires when you're cutting your fuel line. And you can just do a saw motion to cut right through this fuel line. As long as your razor blade is nice and sharp, you should have no problem getting a nice, clean, smooth cut. There we go. We're through our fuel line. Not much gas left in there, especially when the snowblower is in this position. The tank is facing the opposite way. Prevents too much gas from leaking out here if there was anything left in it, but this is an empty tank. Now this is all you're going to need to attach a fuel shutoff switch. 2 clamps, one for either side of the hoses connecting to your switch and your switch. This is all you'll need. So we're going to slide these on the hose first, then we'll add our shutoff switch, and then we'll clamp these down to make sure we have a good secure connection. We can get our gas tank out of the way now. When you slide these on, you're just going to open them up by using your pliers, creating that separation. Slide one on one end, one on the other end. Since we have some play here from the fuel tank, we're not going to need to cut anything out of our fuel line. We're going to keep it long. If it was a tighter fit, we would have to cut a small section out to be able to put this fuel switch in. So let's see. Always make sure you're putting the fuel switch on the right way. This one has an arrow pointing which way the gas is going to flow when the switch is turned. So that's full open, and then that's off there, and we want it to go to the carburetor from the fuel tank. Very simple. If your hose is giving you trouble, it always helps to just heat it up with a heat gun. This hose is a little bit cold. I'm in the garage now. Temperature is pretty low in here today, but it's not too bad. If it takes you any longer than it's taken me, you should definitely heat it up. If it gives me any little bit of trouble, I'll heat it up. Makes it much easier to be able to get that in. We'll take a look at our filter as well while we're over here. Another thing to keep in mind, put your panel back on. Make sure you have it positioned in a good way so that you can turn it on and off. I think I'm going to bring it up a little bit more, but let me take a look with my panel on. This way I get it as good as it can be, you know. Not too bad. Yep, definitely going to bring it up. So by bring it up, I just mean twist it up this way, facing a little bit more upright so that I could get good access to it when I need to. So every time we go to use our snowblower, we're going to turn our fuel on before trying to start it, before priming it. And when we're done using our snowblower, just before we finish, we're going to turn that fuel switch off and let it run out of gas what was in the carburetor. This way we have a nice dry carburetor after every use. Not letting gasoline just sit in that carburetor and cause more problems. There we go. Gonna just push these clamps a little bit more out of the way. Yeah, we got a good connection there. I felt like these connections next to our fuel filter, felt like those were moving a little too easily when I was twisting this hose. Oh yeah, this one's a bit weak. Let's just make sure we have a good connection here on our fuel filter. All right, looks good. Put this one back on. There we go. Now our fuel switch is installed. We'll see how good our access to it is. Oh yeah, that doesn't look bad at all. I'll move the camera over here, give you guys a good view. Perfect. So let me give you guys a nice view of what we just did. So now we have a nice smooth cutout to access our fuel switch. Now we can shut off the fuel whenever we're done using our snowblower. Stop the flow of fuel to the carburetor. Just let the engine run for an extra minute or two. Burn up all that leftover fuel. No problems in the future for the carburetor. Now it's important to put some gas in. Make sure the fuel switch is working properly. Make sure no leaks. Other than that, you're good to go. I've provided links in the description below so you could get shut-off switches like this for any small engines. It's important anytime you're using an engine that has a carburetor, it's an important feature to have is that shut-off switch. This way you can always turn off the gas to the carburetor before you're done. You can run that carburetor dry. It prevents a lot of future problems with your carburetor. Makes it a lot easier, and it's also better for the engine. It's better for the carburetor. Something you should definitely have on any of these small engines that use carburetors. It's also good for lawnmowers, for dirt bikes, for quads. Anything that has a carburetor, you want a shut-off switch. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to Prime Martial Arts.